Hello everyone, it's Movie Mike here, and today I'm going to tell you about the movie Castaway. The scene starts with a FedEx delivery vehicle heading toward a solitary house in the middle of a field. At the entrance to this house, there are arched gates with enclosed wings and several rings. Those same wings are depicted on the box that the FedEx delivery person picks up from Bettina Peterson, the owner of the house. Bettina sent a package for her husband Dick to Moscow, where the story continues. The FedEx courier delivers a second package to a boy named Nikolai, who works as a laborer at the local delivery branch. Nikolai rushes with the box to the office, where an employee named Chuck Nolan has been explaining how things work to the Russians for several hours. The sender of this package, in which there was only a timer, was Chuck himself. With this act, he wanted to demonstrate that the delivery service should work better. Chuck works as an inspector at FedEx and is now assigned to organize the work of a new branch in Moscow. After finishing his work at the new branch, he decides to return to Memphis, where his friends and his longtime girlfriend are waiting for him. Soon, they all gather at the festive table and chat casually, but Chuck's friends are worried about when he will finally get engaged to Kelly, to which the couple laughs it off. They had plans to spend all the holidays together, but Chuck is forced to return to work. He always lacks free time, and even a toothache that bothers him did not make him find time to visit the dentist. His girlfriend accompanies him to the airport, where he is supposed to fly to Malaysia. While sitting in the car at the airport, they decide to exchange gifts since Christmas is approaching. Kelly decides to give Chuck her grandfather's watch with her photo in it. Chuck, jokingly, gives her a notepad, a pager, and a set of towels. As for the real gift, he asks her not to open it until the holidays and hands her a small box, the kind usually used to store engagement rings. On his way to Malaysia, Chuck tries to fall asleep on the plane, but his dreams are interrupted by slight turbulence. Chuck heads to the cockpit to make sure everything is all right. There, he realizes that due to bad weather, the plane has veered off course. Chuck decides to go to the lavatory to freshen up and gather himself. That's when the catastrophe begins. He gets thrown out of the restroom, and the plane starts to descend. Within moments, Chuck finds himself in the water on an inflatable life raft. Later on, Chuck finds himself on the shore of a tiny island that turned out to be like a mirage in the middle of the ocean. Waking up in the morning, Chuck grabs his pager, praying for it to work, and checks if he has lost the watch Kelly gave him. Looking around, he sees FedEx packages that were washed ashore by the unfortunate storm. He takes them and moves them to a drier spot. Chuck feels devastated and disoriented. He tries to call for help, but it proves to be futile. He realizes he's the only one on the island. His first thought is to write "help" in the sand. Then he decides to build a shelter using the wreckage of a boat to create a semblance of comfort. Throughout the night, he can't sleep due to the heavy pounding sound, as if someone is hitting the ground with a sledgehammer. In the morning, Chuck discovers that the letters he wrote in the sand have been washed away. He decides to build the word "help" using logs instead. Afterward, he goes back to the shore to collect the remaining packages that have washed up on the beach. While building the distress signal, he hears a sound, the same as he heard at night. Fearfully, he starts shouting, thinking someone is nearby. Only when he returns to his makeshift home does he realize that the sound was caused by falling coconuts hitting the sand. He finds them to be a source of sustenance. With great effort, he manages to crack open one of the coconuts, drinks the milk, and eats the flesh. After having a snack, Chuck decides to embark on an expedition around the island. He explores both the water and the land, eventually finding a cave on one of the cliffs. Due to his bare feet being covered in numerous small wounds from the long walk, Chuck decides not to go further until he figures out a way to protect them. On his way back, he spots the same package with the angel wings enclosed in rings. For the first time, Chuck decides to make himself some footwear using fabric scraps, palm leaves, and the only remaining sock he has. He chooses to climb to the top of the island to get a better view of his surroundings. Once there, all he sees is the endless ocean, no matter which direction he looks. Suddenly, Chuck notices a person in the water near the shore's edge. Hoping that someone else has survived besides him, he runs towards the person. Unfortunately, the person is already dead, and it's one of the pilots. Nevertheless, Chuck decides to drag the body onto the beach, examines it, and takes valuable belongings from the pilot, a flashlight, and a pair of shoes. Afterward, he decides to bury him, writing the name of the pilot and the date of his death on the stone. One night, Chuck wakes up from a natural urge, when suddenly a faint light on the horizon catches his eye. It's a small vessel passing near the island. In an attempt to attract attention, Chuck grabs a flashlight and tries to signal SOS, but his efforts go unnoticed. Desperate, Chuck takes an inflatable boat and throws it into the water, trying to paddle towards the ship. But he fails as the coastal waves push him back. No matter how hard he tries, it's all in vain. And he ends up being thrown back onto the shore, severely injuring his leg. Soon, a powerful storm sweeps over the island. To seek shelter from it, Chuck takes refuge in a cave and falls asleep. The following day, he decides to open the packages he found on the beach. Many of them contain useless items like cassettes, a dress, and other things. However, he is lucky enough to find ice skates and a ball with the inscription, Wilson. He can't bring himself to open the package with wings, as his conscience urges him to return it to its rightful owner. Using the items he found, he constructs a fishing tool. However, without proper preparation, he can't eat the fish he caught. He then notices a crab and manages to capture it using a sharpened stick, but he soon realizes it is inedible without proper processing. Chuck realizes that fire is crucial for his survival. Therefore, he decides to obtain it by rubbing a stick against a wooden board. He spends the entire day and most of the night attempting, but he can't ignite a fire. Chuck decides to try a different method of obtaining fire by changing his technique of rubbing the objects together. However, he still fails, and moreover, injures his hand. Chuck, overwhelmed by despair, throws everything he was lucky to find, including the wooden board, the stick, the ball, and so on. After washing his hand, he returns to the spot and notices the ball. He sees a bloody imprint on it that resembles facial features. Chuck decides to draw on the ball and name it Wilson. Now he's made his only friend on a deserted island. Contemplating ways to obtain fire, Chuck decides to use the cracked wooden board and the stick in a different manner. The cracks serve as ventilation, allowing air to reach the fire. This approach proves successful. Finally, Chuck is able to cook the fish he caught earlier. However, the toothache continues to bother him. Realizing that it will be a long time before rescue arrives, he decides to extract the tooth. Using the skate and a stone, he knocks it out. 4 years have passed since then. Chuck becomes increasingly unkempt and loses weight. He keeps track of time by creating a makeshift calendar on a rock. During this period, he learns how to catch fish and make fire. However, despair never leaves him, and he even contemplates ending his life. One day, a piece of plastic airplane debris washes ashore. Chuck perceives it as a sign and resolves to use the wreckage as a sail to overcome the coastal waves. He begins constructing a raft, using everything he can find. He creates ropes from tree bark and depicts the wings, reminiscent of the package on a piece of plastic, seeing it as a symbol of hope. Believing it would be wiser to wait for favorable winds, and convinced that he has ample time, Chuck completes the raft while gathering provisions for the journey. On the designated day, he takes Wilson with him and sets sail. Before departing, Chuck leaves a message on a rock. Assisted by the sail, he successfully navigates the waves and ventures into the open ocean. He casts one last glance at the island, realizing that he would rather die trying to save himself than remain alone on the island. Chuck spends the entire day rowing and rests during the night. When it rains, he collects water using coconut shells. Everything seems to be going well until a storm suddenly strikes. The makeshift sail becomes detached from the raft, and the handmade vessel nearly disintegrates. However, the most devastating loss is Wilson, who is carried away into the open ocean. Chuck tries to swim after him, but the rope tethering him to the raft is too short, and he cannot forsake the raft. He cries out for Wilson, but the current carries him farther away. Grieving the loss of his friend, Chuck falls into despair and stops making any further attempts to reach any destination. He simply lies on the raft, drifting with the current, until one fateful day, a cargo ship discovers him. The FedEx company decides to hold a celebratory reception to welcome back their employee, Chuck. He is informed that his girlfriend, Kelly, had promised to attend. However, to his dismay, he is greeted not by Kelly, but by her husband. The husband explains that Kelly was overwhelmed by the meeting, and as Chuck is about to get into his car, he catches sight of Kelly sobbing and wanting to approach him, but her new husband stops her. After the party, Chuck is taken aback by the surplus of leftover food. Holding a lighter in his hand, he smiles sadly. After spending 4 long years on the island, he never managed to fall asleep on a soft bed. He chooses to sleep on the floor while gazing at a photograph of his ex-girlfriend on the watch. Determined to have a personal conversation and return the watch, which is a cherished family heirloom, Chuck decides to visit Kelly in person. Arriving early in the morning at Kelly's house, she opens the door upon hearing the sound of an approaching car. She tells Chuck that she has a little daughter and got married at the insistence of friends in an attempt to cope with the loss of Chuck. Throughout this time, she diligently gathered information about the plane crash, hoping against hope that Chuck had somehow survived. Chuck asks Kelly to take the clock, telling her that it's their family heirloom and it's better for her to keep it in the family. Kelly, in turn, asks him to take their car since it rightfully belongs to him. He is surprised by the fact that she had held onto it all this time. They share a passionate kiss, and just as Chuck is about to leave, he hears Kelly calling out to him. She runs after his car, and in the pouring rain, they embrace once more, confessing their enduring love for each other. However, time has taken its toll, and they cannot be together. Chuck visits his friend to have a talk. He recounts the hardships and perils he faced during his time on the island. One task remains unfinished, returning the package with wings to its rightful owner. However, upon arriving at the owner's place, he can't find her. Undeterred, he leaves the package and a heartfelt note on the doorstep. "This package saved my life," and drives away. Standing at a crossroads, Chuck contemplates where to go next. At that moment, he encounters a young woman who points him in the right direction. As she drives off, he notices the familiar wings adorning the rear of her car, the very same wings from the package. Attentive to the wind blowing against the direction of her departing vehicle, Chuck realizes that fate is guiding him, urging him to follow her. And with that, we conclude our story. Thank you for listening to us until the end. Your likes and comments greatly support our channel's growth. Thank you, friends, and we'll catch you in the next video.